Hi, welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth, and today I'm going to be talking about the 2015 Ultimate Reading Challenge. This reading challenge is from the Pop Sugar website. I first found it on Pinterest and then clicked over and found the whole challenge. That was probably sometime in early January, and I thought, oh, that looks like a really neat challenge. Then it wasn't long after that I found out about BookTube and Goodreads. So it seemed like all these bookish things were kind of coming together, and I had so many books on my TBR that I thought the Ultimate Reading Challenge might be a great way to knock some of the books off of my TBR just by motivating myself to read particular ones that fit with the challenges. There have been a handful of books that I've read just because there was the challenge to read them, but I still tried to pick something that I was really interested in reading or that sounded good to me. I hadn't really done any kind of an organized challenge like this before. I do remember not too many years ago challenging myself to read at least one book a week so that I would average 52 books in the year, but I didn't set any kind of particular categories or anything for it. I also have an ongoing challenge to myself to read all of the Newbery winners. Now this challenge has about 50 prompts for a total of 52 books because one of the prompts is a trilogy, and so I decided not to wait till the end of the year to do a big giant wrap up because that would just make the video really long. So I got to looking at the list and I realized that even though I've been jumping around and reading different books and not reading them in any particular order, I had almost read the first 20. So I got busy in the last couple of weeks, and so I finished up 2 or 3 that were from the first 20 so that I could go ahead and break up the list and do the first 20 for you right now. Now I'm not planning to say a whole lot about each book. I do have plans to make some review videos for a good portion of these books, but I, again, don't want to make one big giant video, and if I start talking about a book, I'm probably going to just ramble. If you are interested in any of these books in particular, leave it in the comments down below, and I'll be sure that I do talk about those books in upcoming wrap-ups or reviews. But for now, I'm probably just going to kind of name the book and maybe say one thing about it. Within this challenge, I decided to add a couple of limitations of my own. These are not things that are spelled out within the challenge. I have just added them on my own. I decided that for this challenge, I would not count any audiobooks. Ebooks are fine, but not e-audiobooks. I would also not count any books that I had read before or that I had listened to on audiobook before. Now I do have several books that I've listened to on audio that I would like to reread. So I've been kind of putting those on hold, and that would motivate me to read new books. Now I will put the link down below for the Ultimate Reading Challenge, as well as the Goodreads group that I'm a member of. And the Goodreads group has been particularly helpful because there are different threads for the different prompts, and sometimes if you're stuck on one and you're not really sure what to read or you need some ideas, you can go look at that thread and get some ideas for what other people have read or are planning to read for that particular challenge. Now, most of these books that I am going to show you today are not my own. I have had to recheck them from the library. So let's get started. Challenge number 1 was to read a book with more than 500 pages. If you saw my TBR takedown video, you know that I read Christy, and it has 501 pages. So that made it the perfect book for this challenge. The number 2 prompt was to read a classic romance. I wasn't really in the mood to read one of the really old classics, plus I really didn't know which specific books were considered romances. So I decided to go with a vintage 1970 romance, which is Love Story by Erich Segal. I also read this for TBR Takedown 2.0. I didn't really particularly enjoy it, but it was always something that I'd been curious about because it was a movie that my sister drugged me to when I was pretty young, and so I thought it would be fun to read this book. The third prompt was to read a book that later became a movie. I read The City of Ember by Jeanne DuPrau, and I loved this book. I have already read the sequel to it, and there are 2 more books in the series that I have yet to read. It was made into a movie. I'm not sure what year. The movie starred Bill Murray and a couple of kids who I'm sorry I don't know their names, but I thought it was an excellent book. Number 4, a book published this year. I read The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. I really liked this book. I read it in June. I really thought it was an excellent book. Number 5, a book with a number in the title. This was one that my husband had checked out from the library earlier this year, and I decided I should read it while he had it checked out. It's 25 Ways to Win with People by John Maxwell and Les Parrott. I would rank this book right up there with How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which was a book that my father always wanted me to read, and I finally read it later on in adulthood after he had passed on. So I know he would be proud of me for reading that and reading this as well. I think if I had read the Dale Carnegie book a lot earlier, it probably would have saved me some headaches that I created in my own life and relationships. But it's never too late to learn, and this is an excellent book. Number 6, a book written by someone under 30. According to my calculations, when I looked up Sarah J. Maas, I believe that she is under 30. So I read A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I did really enjoy it. Number 7, a book with non-human characters. Now this has some human characters, but the main character of this book is a gorilla. This is The One and Only Ivan by Katherine Applegate. I also read this because it's a Newbery winner. I thought this was an amazing book. It is based on a true gorilla, but this is a fictitious story. But it is definitely a very good book. I heard Book Geek and Movie Freak talking about this the other day on her channel, and I said I agree. I think this is a wonderful book and everyone should read it. So challenge number 8 is to read a funny book. Now I picked up this book from my daughter's middle school library one day when I was volunteering, and I was reshelving, and I thought it looked really entertaining. At the time I wasn't thinking about the challenge, but after I literally laughed out loud reading this book, I knew I had to plug this into that category. This is Charlie Joe Jackson's Guide to Not Reading by Tommy Greenwald. I really enjoyed this book. The lengths that this kid goes to not read are so funny, and I think all book lovers should read this book because you will get such a kick out of it. Number 9 is to read a book by a female author. Well, this is not really that hard for me because I read a lot of books by female authors, but an author was introduced to me this year named Sandra Dallas. Now I have since then read about 4 of her books. They're not my particular favorites, but I did enjoy this one, and it's called The Persian Pickle Club. I think the setting is the 50s or 60s, and it's a group of women from a small community who get together once a week, and they do quilting, and they read together, and they just have a social time together, and they are called the Persian Pickle Club. It has a mystery woven through, and I thought it was very entertaining, and I did enjoy it a lot. Number 10 is to read a mystery or thriller. My husband and I do listen to several mysteries on audio. One of those series that we have been listening to is the Cat Who series by Lillian Jackson Braun. And this particular book, the audio was not available at our library, and so I had to end up checking it out so we could read it. And I realized that I could plug it into that category because it is a mystery. Not a thriller, but it is a mystery. And these are fun. I really do enjoy the Cat Who books. I love cats, and these the Cat Who series is a little lighter. I have heard people who read mysteries say that they're boring, but it's just according to what you like, and we do enjoy these books. Number 11 is read a book with a one-word title. Now, I have read several middle grade books this year, and this is one of them. It's called Schooled by Gordon Corman. I've read a couple of other books by Gordon Corman, and I've enjoyed them. This in particular was a lot of fun, and I probably will do some sort of a middle grade wrap-up later on, and I will include this in that. Number 12 is to read a book of short stories. I read a Chicken Soup for the Soul book, and I don't have the actual one because it was one that someone had donated to the Little Free Library downtown. So I read it, and then I put it back, not really even thinking about this challenge at that time. It was just one that I thought looked interesting to read. It was called A Taste of Chicken Soup for Mothers and Daughters. So this is Chicken Soup for the Soul. This is Chicken Soup for the Mother and Daughter Soul. The stories I read were like excerpts from this book. It was a smaller little, it was just a little small version of this book. When I was all done filming this video, I found this on my shelf. This is actually more comparable to the chicken soup book that I read for this challenge. This is A Taste of Chicken Soup for the Christian Family Soul, and as I mentioned, I read A Taste of Chicken Soup for the Mother and Daughter Soul, and it's simply just a smaller, scaled-down version of the larger book that I just showed you. Challenge number 13 is to read a book set in a foreign country. I read Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins, which takes place in France. So challenge number 14 is to read a nonfiction book. I've read several nonfiction books already this year, but the one I counted for this challenge is The New Atkins Made Easy by Colette Heimowitz. The reason I read this is because my daughter's neurologist recommended that we try the Atkins diet for seizures. My 14-year-old has autism and epilepsy, and we have not been able to control the seizures through medication, so we are trying the Atkins diet. We've been on it since January, and she has lost 30 pounds and still is having seizures. So back to the drawing board, but we have really enjoyed the Atkins diet. I've lost 40 pounds myself, and it's been a great diet and not nearly as difficult as I was afraid it was going to be. So we continue to do it. If you are interested in the Atkins diet, I think this particular book is very user-friendly and really spells out what you need to do to be successful on the diet. I do recommend going back and reading the actual book by Dr. Atkins, but this one is a very good supplement if you're actually going to do the diet. Challenge number 15 is to read a popular author's first book. Well, I wanted to choose an author that has a lot of books, so I looked at John Grisham's first book, and it was pretty long, and I thought, well, you know, I don't really read a lot of John Grisham anyway. Who's an author that's popular that I like to read? And I thought about Debbie Macomber. I have read quite a few of her books, and I knew that she had some really old books that were published in the 80s by, I think, Harlequin and Silhouette, and so I found what appears to be the very first one published, and it's called Heart Song. Again, it's by Debbie Macomber. It was originally published, I think, in 1984 by Silhouette Inspirations, and it does have a Christian message that is woven into it, and I did really enjoy this book. Number 16 is to read a book from an author you like that you haven't read yet. If you watched my BookTube intro, I mentioned that one of my favorite authors and favorite book series is the Miss Julia series. I have listened to the majority of those on audio, and I got to number 14 a couple years ago, and the audio was not available at the library. At that time, the majority of my reading was done on audiobook, and I just never got around to getting the actual physical book and reading it, even though I absolutely love the series. So not too long ago, I introduced the books to my craft group at church, and they started reading them, and we started kind of collecting the I started collecting the used copies as I would find them at book sales and bookstores. And so one day I found book 14, which was the next one I had not read, and I decided I better get on the ball and read this book. This is Miss Julia Stirs Up Trouble, and it's the 14th book in the Miss Julia series, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is just as good as all the other Miss Julia books. They are hilarious. If you've never heard of Miss Julia, she's a woman of a certain age from North Carolina, and this is just wonderful, amazing Southern humor. I will probably do a whole book talk at some point on Anne B. Ross and her Miss Julia series, because I just love them. They're very light, very fun, you know, nothing that you have to think too deeply about, but just incredibly entertaining. So now I am motivated to go on and read. There have been 3 more books published since this one that I really need to get busy reading. Number 17 is to read a book that was recommended by a friend. So earlier this year, I was at a friend's house, and she said, "Oh, have you seen this book? It's called The Diary of Maddie Spencer by Sandra Dallas." And she said that she told me about some of Sandra Dallas's books have a quilting theme, and I've already shown you the Persian Pickle Club. This one in particular, she said she really enjoyed. So I was able to find me a copy of it. So I read it for BookTubeathon, and I passed my copy on to my sister, so I had to borrow my friend's copy to show you in the video. So thank you, Kathy, for that. But I thought this book was very enjoyable to read. I mentioned in my Booktubeathon wrap-up, though, that I was disappointed in the characters. They let me down at the end, but it didn't make it a bad book. I just wish that the characters had made different choices. Prompt number 18 is to read a Pulitzer Prize winning book. I heard Gilead reviewed by Ashley at Climb the Stacks, and I thought it sounded really good. The premise is about a preacher, an elderly preacher who is writing a series of letters or a journal to his young son because he knows that he's not going to live much longer. And so I will probably do a separate review of this later, but I did really enjoy this book. Number 19 is read a book based on a true story. Now, I kind of fudged a little on this one because this book really just is a true story. It's not fictionalized, but it was on my shelf and I really wanted to read it, so I read this in July right before the TBR takedown. It's called The Horse Boy, A Father's Quest to Heal His Son by Rupert Isaacson. All right, and number 20, a book that was at the end of your TBR. I interpreted that to mean read a book that you hadn't been planning on getting to very soon, so go ahead and bump it on up and read it. Now, I chose Mrs. Lincoln's Dressmaker by Jennifer Shiverini because I do plan to read all of Jennifer Shiverini's books, but because most of her books are part of a series, I plan to read them in the order that they were written. So it would have been a while before I got to this one, but I went ahead and read it because my book club was reading it, and so I went ahead and decided to bump it up, and therefore am counting it for this challenge. Those are my 20 books for the first 20 prompts of the 2015 Ultimate Reading Challenge by Pop Sugar. Again, I will link below the challenge itself as well as the Goodreads page. I have already read probably another 15 of the books in the rest of the challenge, but again, I've been skipping around, so I'm going to look at the next 15 on the list and go ahead and fill in those blanks, and when I get those read, when I finish reading the next 15, then I will do another video, and then at the end of the year I will wrap up the last 15 and we'll see what Ultimate Reading Challenge we have for 2016. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you'll subscribe. I have a lot of really neat things coming up soon, I hope. And even though school has started back, and I'm a substitute teacher, I'm still planning on taking out a little time to film and upload videos. I have some tags that I really want to do, so I'm going to catch up with some of my reviews and then get busy doing some tags. And I hope you will subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. So have a great day, read a good book, and God bless you.